Okay, other discussion on the amendment, Supervisor Walkinshaw.
Yeah, I'll support the amendment. I would like, and probably at some point, I think a lot of us want to get some kind of report back in terms of how this is going, but I think one of the things we have to look at is, do we have folks who are choosing to pay the fine rather than pay for the containment measures? And every dollar that we reduce the maximum fine, it becomes to make more sense for someone to do that. I have an HOA in my district that just spent $3,000 to do 125 linear feet of trenching to contain bamboo. So by going from 3 to 2, we presumably increase the number of people for whom it would make sense to make that decision. So I'd like to know at some point, 6 months, 12 months from now, whether that's a problem. And I think it's important that we have a checkpoint to go back and determine whether we need to go to the full 3,000.
Thank you. Supervisor Walkinshaw, and I think without a doubt, we're going to want that report and know what's going on in the field to go back and tweak, because if we've learned anything from this, it's going to be imperfect. And there might likely be things that we discover in the field that have to come back and be tweaked. If an individual who owns a property puts their property up for sale and has this violation, kind of back to the point of the economics of this, they have this violation, that has to be disclosed to the future purchaser?
I don't know that we're not going to know a house for sale. This is the same thing we run into realtors when somebody flips a property and there's unpermitted construction. If it's not taken care of and we get a complaint, it falls onto the new owner. We just don't have any way to know that house is being sold.
So I think that's something, we need to be cognizant of. Obviously, we hope that doesn't happen very often, but back to the, concerns about the fees and the penalties, and I certainly know how much it costs and how much staff work it takes to get to a point of taking someone to court. And we're not ever in the business of trying to make money. We're in the business of trying to force the hand of compliance. But I also know that, to a certain extent, it becomes a real challenge for us in handling the staff time and effort. And, frankly, as we discussed earlier, by the time something gets to court, if it's that egregious, the fine amount might be way less than the cost of the legal process. So the hope is that you end up with compliance, because obviously, even to Supervisor Walkinshaw's example, you wouldn't want, I would hope, certainly if you're an HOA, you wouldn't want a violation hanging out there that later would have to go to court. You'd be forced to come into court, pay legal expenses, potentially have representation, and hopefully that will far exceed the cost of just bringing the property into compliance. And so I'm supportive of the amendment, but with a little bit of trepidation, because what we don't know is how much voluntary compliance there will be versus how many people who are debating this total fine amount and doing nothing. And that's why I think the reporting is going to be important. Frankly, if it's an excuse for people to ignore the violation because the fine isn't high enough, then we need to be coming back and adjusting the fine. And I will be one of the first people to support that if that's the case. But I am willing to give the amendment a try because of the complexity and the difficulty and the amount of communication and education that we're going to need here. I'm willing to give that a try. Others who would like to comment on the amendment? Seeing and hearing none, all those in favor of the amendment, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstentions? And that is approved 9-1. Supervisor Gross voting no. Supervisor Stork.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I'll conclude with just, I think the comments have been made about an education campaign are very appropriate and one that I think we all endorse. We have a Board of Supervisor Environmental Committee meeting on May 17th. And I would ask, as part of this conversation today, that the staff put together a campaign, send it out in a NIP ahead of the board meeting, ahead of the committee meeting, so that we could take 5 minutes at the committee meeting if anybody has any questions or anything else that they want or have concerns about, they could do it then. But that gives staff a couple months to put something together, and if they obviously have questions or concerns, and they want to share that with individual board members, they're more than welcome to do that. But that hopefully will address the concern I think we all have, which is we're giving more time, but let's make sure we don't waste that time by not doing everything we can to educate the community about this noxious weed and what we need to do to contain it. So, thank you.
And Supervisor Stork, did you want to make your, why don't you make your main motion? We'll have discussion on that and then a vote.
Oh, as amended, okay. I move that the Board of Supervisors adopt the proposed amendments to Chapter 119 of the Fairfax County Code to establish regulations on running bamboo, to add a new Article 4 to establish civil penalties, I guess I would say including a maximum of $2,000, and make other editorial revisions to Chapter 119 for clarity, all as set out in the public hearing draft of the amendments included in Attachment 2 to the board's agenda item for March 22nd, 2022, related to Chapter 119, with such amendment taking effect on January 1st, 2023.
You've heard the motion. It's been seconded by Supervisor Alcorn. Further discussion on the motion? Seeing and hearing none, all those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstentions? And that motion carries 10-0. And I'm not going to make this motion because I know that staff heard it, but, we are going to want to get reports of what's happening in the field, probably at least annually, so that we know what you're discovering out there, and certainly any advice or challenges that you're running into in terms of voluntary compliance would be helpful for us to know. And we recognize this is going to be difficult to enforce, but it's an important initiative, and it's one that, certainly if we need to tweak down the road, we will tweak, but we certainly want updates coming back to the board so that, we know what's happening. Supervisor Stork.
And Mr. Chairman, we'll just put that as part of the Environmental Committee agenda
Excellent.
annually at this point, and then that at least will give you an opportunity to hear further about it. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you, Supervisor Stork.